how will you choose who is the best suited for you and who will most probably close? So you need to literally narrow it down to that level. Today, the person has got an ideal customer profile that he can tell you, if your revenue is above this much, if you do not have a CIO, if you do not have an admin head, if you do not have X, if you do not have Y, you're not my ideal customer. For SaaS companies, my recommendation is look at the total addressable market. How large is the market? And is it a sustainable market?
Welcome to a brand new episode of Mobile App Daily interview series. Joining me today is Mrigank Tripathi. He is the growth mentor at SGS by SaaS Bhoomi, which is essentially a 4-month intensive founder-led program for SaaS startups. The strategy consultant turned digital entrepreneur turned growth leader has a background in startups, sales and operations, entrepreneurship, and strategy consulting. Outside of work, Mrigank is a big fan of scuba diving. He's an advanced PADI certified scuba diver, loves to trek, swim, and play squash. Mrigank, thank you so much for joining us today in this interview. How are you today?
Very well. Thanks very much for having me here. Appreciate it.
Let's start by getting to know a bit more about your role at SaaS Bhoomi. So could you tell me a bit about your role as a growth leader at SGX by SaaS Bhoomi and what that entails?
Sure. So SaaS Bhoomi is a founder-led community where you have a paid forward initiative of ex-entrepreneurs or current founders who are just helping groom the next level of founders to come up the value curve. And I've been involved because I've been involved in the growth side of things. We held a growth one-day boot camp during COVID, which is in 2020, and founders came back and said it was a very intensive, hands-on, tactical, what to do, what not to do type of activity. And that's when founders came back and said they needed more depth. So that's how we devised a 4-month intensive program wherein there are founders, current founders, ex-founders, growth leaders, two founders per startup who actually become mentors for that startup over 4 months. And then they actually sit with that. It's literally like having another colleague of yours who's literally at the same level, maybe has got more experience, actually guide you and say, what do you need to do for growth? The focus is very purely growth, right? So we go through everything right from the ideal customer profile to value prop canvas to even figuring out what's your outbound motion, how should you do inbound, what is right, what is wrong, the whole 9 yards. But it's tailored to every single startup. And that's really what the beauty is, because you have 2 mentors per startup, and over 4 weeks you have a bit of a joining program. That's really what SGX is, and that's what we've been doing for some time. I've been one of the founding members of this, and now we're in the 4th cohort of this initiative, and we hope to sort of carry this forward for many more years.
All right. So prior to your experience as a founder and a growth leader at SaaS Bhoomi, you were also the chief growth officer at PeopleStrong. And
I'm currently so SaaS Bhoomi is it's a pro bono initiative. It's a volunteer initiative. I'm not getting paid anything for it, right? We all do it just out of the love of our hearts and in the hope that we will make India into a SaaS capital of the world. And that's really why we're all just sort of involved. And it's not just me. There are many founders who are just lending their time and effort to build out the SaaS ecosystem here in India. That's a completely voluntary role. My day role is that of a growth leader at PeopleStrong, which is one of Asia's largest HR technology firms, and I lead overall growth for them, which includes new geographies, new products, new markets, new approaches, marketing, sales, the whole 9 yards. That's really what I do in my day job.
All right. So at PeopleStrong as the chief growth officer, you are also responsible for overall company growth and expansion into MEA. So could you tell me a little bit about how that goes about?
So when we're in the enterprise space, right? So we're in enterprise HR tech space, and that requires a fairly detailed approach. And it's not It's not like an SMB sale that you just put an SDR, somebody calls out, gets a lead, somebody gives a demo, and the deal closes. It's a much more elaborate process. So how do you actually figure out what's your right target segment in the Middle East? It's a new market, it's a new requirement, it's a new geography, it's a new landscape. What exactly is required over there? So we went in there, we figured that out. We set up a team for that. We figured out what are the marketing activities that we need to do. How should we be doing that? All of those elements are part of this. Anyways, India is part of my gamut, and India is one of the larger territories from PeopleStrong's perspective. We might be one of the few companies that has actually done the type of revenues that we have from India on SaaS and enterprise SaaS. Right? So that's really what I do as a day job. Just make sure that all these pieces stick together, right from figuring out what is the right messaging to the right channel to the right product to the right customer, and then sort of helping stitch everything together to bring them all into the bucket of PeopleStrong.
I suppose how SaaS space is different in the Middle East and India, or is there a key difference between the SaaS community or the SaaS needs in Indian market versus Middle East market?
No, it's just the maturity of the market, I think. In India, most companies, the space that we operate in is the enterprise space, right? Over here, most enterprises have experienced some level of technology. In the Middle East, in some regions, they've not even experienced the first level of technology. So they're actually behind us as far as technology goes. In other places, they have experienced some part of technology, but have never experienced the full-blown spectrum. So the requirements are different. And I think the important point is it really depends on what your ideal customer profile is. For example, if somebody is looking at a small to medium enterprise segment here in India, their requirement is going to be dramatically different from that of a mid-sized organization which has got 1,000 people in India, or in the UAE. And that's really what you need to understand. Who are you selling to? What is their pain point? Does your product address that? Can you address that? If yes, then communicate about that. And that's really what we do.
All right. So, were there any key differences in company operations or how your leadership style changed, before getting acquired versus after?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were on a 0 to 1 journey, right?
Oh.
We were on a 0 to 1 journey. A 0 to 1 journey is basically when you start out and you have to get to your first million or a couple of millions. PeopleStrong was on a 10 to 100 journey. So the scale was very different, right? They were a much larger company, are a much larger company even now. And when you're I think the beautiful part about, I think the best part about PeopleStrong is that it's not something that's a my way or a highway type of approach, right? The leadership is never saying that, do this, don't do it only this way. And that's what I was inducted into. So even when I sort of came into the company, I was made part of the executive team, and today I'm of course still very much a part of it, take part in all the key decisions of the company. But the important point was I myself learned that what does it take to go from a 0 to 1 to a 1 to 10 to a 10 to 100, and how it changes your overall approach to things. How at what times is what important? When is consensus important? When are executive decisions important? When is it right to actually document things? When is it right to delegate? When is it not right to delegate? When is it right to invest? When is it not right to invest? What are the signals? All of those sorts of things I've understood, right? My own self. I do believe that because of the fact that I came from a much more entrepreneurial background, even the sales side of it and the growth side of it took a much more entrepreneurial route, because that was working much more with me. So we'd experiment a lot more, and we thankfully sort of settled in on the best route, on the best approach. SaaS Bhoomi helped. I also learned quite a bit from SaaS Bhoomi, implemented some of that back at PeopleStrong as well. And now we're in a good space. We're growing fairly well, and touch wood, I have a good team across the regions, and we're doing all right.
That's wonderful. So what's one or few things an inexperienced startup gets wrong about sales?
I think the number one, the biggest problem that I have seen small or younger stage startups actually do is that they go for everything. Right? That's a problem. If it's not a problem today, it will become a problem tomorrow for sure. You need to. My advice to every single entrepreneur is before your product is ready, you should have spoken with 100 potential customers. You should have, and not about the product, not about their problem. Say, how would you go about solving that problem? So, how would you find the solution to this problem? If I were to say, hey, you need to, let's say, have a solution which says, let's say I'm selling a software which will do a sort of a Zoom call, and you should have a software to be able to record it and then present it to somebody else. Let's say that's the product I'm selling. Then I should be talking to almost everybody who could potentially have this requirement. Ask them not that where would you go, why would you choose, what are the decisions that made you come to Gmail, what are the decisions that made you go to Zoom, what are the decisions that made you go to Cisco. How would you go about doing it? Like, for example, a large enterprise might say, I'm going to go to Cisco, or I'm going to go to somebody else for the same solution that you're using because of security reasons. A simple entrepreneur might say, look, I care less about anything else. I just want, my cost should be low, quality should be good, everything should be there should be no limits. I'll go to Google. Somebody else would say, look, I need to be able to manage my number of people as a central person. I'll go to Zoom. So what are those requirements? If you understand the requirements, right, then you're able to really tailor down and figure out how to reach them. So if it's an entrepreneur who's actually going to be looking at this type of a product, that's your target market. How are you going to reach those guys? So then you should ask the question, hey, how are you going to find such a solution? Who will you actually ask? Are you going to go into WhatsApp groups? Are you going to go and do search on Google? Are you going to read up about it? Are you going to go on YouTube? What are you going to do? Are you going to go to G2? That will give you the channels where you should actually be going, right? And then from there, you will be able to sell more. So that's the first part, which is the ideal customer profile. The second very correlated part to this is that people think that because I know so many people, I will be able to sell. In the initial days, because somebody was in the finance industry, he or she thinks that they will be able to make a $10 million company out of finance just because of that. Yes, those initial contacts will help you get to 500,000, $1 million. But beyond that, even your contacts will stop. Then you need to have a system for that. That system needs to be built today. That's the system which starts from the whole marketing side of it. In SaaS or in entrepreneurship, if you do not understand your customer, if you do not understand how to acquire your customer, then you will at some particular point in time hit a roadblock. Right? So whatever that flywheel is, you need that flywheel because predictability is the name of the game. God forbid if you're in hospital tomorrow, what's going to happen to your business? It's going to go down the drain because no other business is coming down. You can't afford that, right? Yeah. So that's what I would that would be my biggest recommendation to
startups. No, certainly that's very helpful. And in fact, my very next question was, how should businesses pursue marketing in the Web 3.0 era, whether that be SaaS startups or any other company?
Again, the question goes back to your ideal customer profile. Who's your customer? If you don't know your customer, like you should be able to literally, when you meet somebody, shake hands with the person utters the first word or the first discussion, you should know whether this is your customer or not, whether this is a potential customer or not. Because otherwise, it's just, it's too wide a world. You got 8 billion people on Mother Earth, and how are you going to reach out to everybody? Till the time that you don't understand, I'll give you an example. In one of our SGX companies, there was a person who said, look, I help financial companies do X. That's a good enough place to be at. So he knows that he wants to go to financial companies. Okay, good. And then we said, is that really, so how big is your total addressable market? And then he said, look, my addressable market is in India, Southeast Asia, America. Okay, fantastic. How are you going to target all of these? You've got limited resources. So where are you going to go? So then he said, actually, let me do the TAM for India, Southeast Asia, and America. Then he said, okay, America, largest number of fans. Okay, fantastic. How many in America? Okay, these many. Fair. And so how will you reach a bank? How will you reach an insurance company? How will you reach a broker? How will you reach somebody else? He said, oh, then you narrowed it down to saying, okay, I'm going to go to only NBFCs. He says, how many do you have in NBFCs? Then he said, okay, in NBFCs, I have so many. Okay, now out of this, how will you choose who is the best suited for you and who will most probably close? So you need to literally narrow it down to that level. Today, the person has got an ideal customer profile that he can tell you, if your revenue is above this much, if you do not have a CIO, if you do not have an admin head, if you do not have X, if you do not have Y, you're not my ideal customer. You will not buy from me. Or I don't want to sell to you, one of the two. There's a very famous, I always refer back to this. Pallav is a great friend, and he was the founder of Fusion Charts. And his philosophy was, look, I don't want to be selling to anybody. I want somebody to come to my website. If they like what they see, they should put in their credit card and then go. I'll give them the product, but I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to hear pains from anybody. That's his ideal customer profile. So his ideal customer profile, well, one qualification of the ideal customer profile, his profile was, if you need to talk to me or I need to talk to you, then we're not meant for each other. Which means that you're not comfortable enough giving me your money without talking to me, and I don't want to talk to you. We don't want to do business together. It's fine. Please go elsewhere. Right? So you need to be clear enough about this. But for him to be able to say that, he would not have been able to say that if it were only sales-led. If he were calling only his friends to his website and only his friends were coming, then he would say, "Nahi yaar, aap le lo. Please take it." Right? No, I want you to take it, because then desperation sets in. So what you need to have is a flywheel. While you're sitting on the beach, 500 people should have come, 100 of them should have bought and gone away. That's the ideal flywheel for you to have, and that's what we help. That's what SGX is trying to help companies build.
All right. So what are some of the marketing tools perhaps you use a lot at SaaS Bhoomi or you recommend?
I think the basics are what are needed, right? Marketing tools, there is a plethora of them out there, but I think from a basic perspective, you do need to have a sales automation system, a marketing automation system. You should have in the SaaS ecosystem, at least, you should have a database of your customers, wherever you get that from, whether it's Zoom Info or whatever else. Put that into your database. You need to have a good landing page mechanism. HubSpot is a good mechanism for that. Pipedrive or whosoever else. I'm not advertising for one or the other, but majority of the companies that we know use HubSpot for whatever reason it is. So yeah, those are some of the most basic ones, and that is typically required at the time of when you reach some sort of product market fit, and then moving on from there. But yeah, those are broadly the ones that happen. And then beyond that, there are 50,000 others, right? You can keep on optimizing it for something on your website, recapture, yada yada yada. I don't want to get into that. That's like all those.
No, certainly. All right. You're also involved in strategy consulting. So could you shed some light on your role at that, what the domain entails, and how it helps target customers?
See, strategy consulting is, to a lot of people, it's like looking at your watch and telling you the time. But it's very different. It's actually very different, right? So it's like saying, to my mind, I think if anybody wants to really be able to crack problems in a structured manner, strategy consulting helps you do that. So if it's a large company, they have a profitability problem and they want to become more profitable, strategy consulting will actually do all the tough work to tell you, if you do A, B, and C, you will be able to become more profitable, right? And that's really what I was doing when I was a strategy consultant. I was primarily in the telecom space, and I was helping large telecom operators in the Middle East merge two companies, become more profitable, reduce their costs, set up their sales ecosystem, all of those sorts of things. Whatever the problem could be. The problem could be anything, right? Right now, I've just given you one of those, but the problem could be, I want to set up I am an incumbent and I want to now become the number one internet operator. How do I do that? That's a problem. Now, there are steps to doing that. What all do you need to do for that? That's what a strategy consultant can actually help you do quickly, well, and thoroughly. You can also do it, yes, but most probably it will not be as quick, it will not be as thorough, and it will not be as good. So yes, they do charge a bomb, but I think it's very well worth it for companies who need to sort of get the best of talent and be able to sort of deliver on that. So that's what I was doing in strategy consulting. Strategy consulting, the way that you sell in strategy consulting is very different from what you do in the internet space, right? It's much more consultative sales. It's a need for you to be able to get the other person across the table to understand that they actually have this problem, and if they were to solve it, what would the difference really be for them? Right? Now, the minute you're able to do that, then everybody will say, yeah, actually, you're right. If I do this, then this is what. Then it comes the cost benefit analysis. What's the benefit? I'm going to make $10 million if I solve this problem. What's the cost? It's $500,000. Okay, let's do it. Right. So that's the broad approach that you take in strategy consulting from a sales perspective. I thoroughly recommend strategy consulting for anybody and everybody who can potentially get in there. It's a tough place to get to, but it's a brilliant learning ground for anybody, for any entrepreneur, because you really understand the nuts and bolts of how to solve for problems. And as entrepreneurs, we're getting problems every single day.
All right, and for the last segment, SaaS companies and AI wave, let me just ask the very same question applicable to the SaaS space. So, how has the pandemic changed the SaaS ecosystem, and what changes do you expect to see, say, perhaps in the next 9 to 10 months or even near future?
The pandemic was good for SaaS companies. Companies which were out there and they were sitting on the fence and they were still talking about on-prem and on cloud and stuff like that. Now they very clearly realize that there's no way that you can remain on-prem, and that they've had to move to the cloud, because if there's nobody in the office who can actually service the on-prem, then what are you going to do? I remember there's a client of ours, they could not be on-prem, but they had to run their entire company's performance cycle in March. Now, how are they going to do that? So they actually asked us, can you please move everything onto the cloud like now? So we did that, and then they became customers of ours like that. So the overall ecosystem is definitely changing, right? And people are becoming much more adept at the whole cloud thing. There used to be I think that there are still some companies who say, no, I want it on my private cloud, I want it on my hosting servers. But that's a minority rather than a majority now. So there's a lot of change that's happening, and I think we'll continue to see some of that continue as we move.
So, like you mentioned, that a lot of SaaS companies have emerged during the pandemic. What are some of the key considerations, or rather checklists, that they should pay attention to when they're entering into new market or just starting out?
For SaaS companies, my recommendation is look at the total addressable market. How large is the market, and is it a sustainable market? Like, for example, when during the pandemic, a wave had come wherein people wanted to have a lot more interactions with each other using video, which were not around business. They want to have social interactions, right?
Yeah.
So if you recall, there's a company called AirMeet, and I think that they did a brilliant job of it. They quickly launched a conference system wherein you could hold events. And what they did was very cleverly, they had breakout areas. Now, in those breakout areas, there would be like small Zoom rooms or whatever, hangout rooms, wherein 4 people could go in, and you had to block a seat before that. Oh, this person I want to sit over here. And you could go in there and do that. Now, it was a great innovation, right? Now, of course, they've grown and are a completely different trajectory and are doing something completely different. But those sorts of things were relevant at that time. What is relevant today? Again, what's the pain point of the customer? Is that pain deep enough? Is it a lasting enough pain? Can you make a big impact to it? If the answer to all of that is in a positive, then please go ahead and do it.
Interesting. How do you see big data, machine learning, and AI systems sort of changing the ecosystem for SaaS companies in general?
like I said, if you have something which is one level above, right? For example, if let's say I'm in the HR tech space, I know that Mrigank is marks in or doesn't mark in his attendance, right? That's a data point that I have. How can I use this data in conjunction to, let's say, 2 million other people and predict what will Mrigank do tomorrow? It's a possibility, but now you have those tools available much more easily, right? And you can do a lot more with them. So that's really what's gonna happen. You will start using your data in your context and then start embedding it into the overall system and say, how can we utilize this better? That's what will happen. Also, I think the interfaces will change. Today we have many interfaces which are very click type of interfaces. They will become much more chat driven. So, and that's all thanks to ChatGPT.
Do you think conversational AI will make a dent in the recent, like in the coming years, in the corporate space?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything can now be just asked of a chat and come, and the data can come, right? If ChatGPT can give you a fully written content article, then it can definitely hook into your database and be able to contextualize and give you something from there. The bigger question is, do you actually have that data in that structure, and can you actually utilize that to be able to do more?
As a serial entrepreneur, you've led various companies, and I'm sure there's tons of advice that you have for emerging startups. So I wanted to know, particularly for SaaS startups, as a serial founder, what advice do you have?
Start now if you haven't started, and if you have started, focus on growth more than sales, and don't think of these two as two separate elements. If you do not have growth marketing in place in your SaaS startup, then you will most probably end up with very short-term revenue but not long-term growth. If you want to do long-term growth, focus on SaaS marketing or growth marketing.
And you also, what about fundraising? How should a completely new entrepreneur that is new to it should approach it?
Look, my personal view is that if you can get by without raising funds, then get by without raising funds. At least till the time. Fundraising is best done when you have absolutely no need for it. You want it, different issue, but you don't need it. It's best done at that time, right? So build out a product, take it out into the market, understand the basics, get some customers in, get some revenue flowing, be cash flow positive, be unit economic positive. At that time, companies will come to you to fund you, because everybody likes a healthy EBITDA in a growth company. No, why? Who wouldn't? They're an aberration rather than the rule. Focus on that. And if you do need to go out there and raise funds, fine. But today is not the best time to be able to do it. Having said that, I would even sort of go back and say 2 years back was maybe a worse time to do it, because you got overvalued. And every company that got overvalued at that time is now completely undervalued today. So they're all facing that same problem. Whoever raised capital in the heydays, they're now facing problems in raising a next round, because everything is now in a down round. All of those sorts of things will start happening. So don't. I think we as entrepreneurs, and especially as first-time entrepreneurs, we pay too much attention to the hoopla around fundraising and stuff. It's just a means to an end. It's like saying that your father gave you some pocket money for you to spend. Just because he gave you pocket money doesn't make it you don't make it to the newspapers, right? It's like that.
Yeah.
What you need to do is, when you actually buy your Xbox after saving that pocket money, that is worthy of getting to the newspaper. Not the fact that your father gave you pocket money, because he's going to be asking you, what did you do with that pocket money? Why did you spend it so unwise?
Yes.
And you're going to get scolded for it. So it's just that. That's really what you need to do. Focus on building a company. Don't focus on raising funds.
There's another thing. Company culture is one of the things that's often talked about in the entrepreneurial circle, and I was wondering as a serial founder, what's your go-to advice for newbie entrepreneurs and how they can foster a culture of good company culture?
I think it's a very individual thing, to be honest. Culture always comes top down. If I personally, look, this is a very personal choice again. Somebody always likes to have an authoritarian culture, saying that it's my way or the highway. Others will say no, we'll have a much more consensus driven culture. Somebody else will turn around and say, I'm going to just delegate and have everybody else do it. Everybody's a CEO of their own business. Depends on how you actually are brought up and what type of founder are you. The most successful ventures, though, historically have been built by equals, not by senior and juniors. So when I say equals, that means the CEO knows that the head of sales or the chief sales officer is the final authority for sales. The CEO also knows that the CTO is the final authority for technology. And the CTO knows that if he says that this is not the way to do it, then it's not the way to do it. And the CEO will agree with that. A lot of time that doesn't happen. I made this mistake my own self. I think if I were to go back and change anything, that would be it. But equality in terms of thought process, ability to come to the table and own what you're delivering is extremely important. Extremely important. Right? And that fosters a culture of ownership. Otherwise, you will always have a culture of it's not my monkey, it's his monkey, and it's on his back. Right? That's something that I would very, very consciously, and that then comes around to who are the people who are your chief sales officer or your chief of finance officer or your chief technology officer. They need to be better than you are at that function. Not in general management, but at that function. So if the sales head is better than you, great. Then that means that you will do better sales. Then he'll call you in, but he'll tell you what to do over there. The CTO is better than you, fantastic. The CFO is better than you, fantastic. CMO is better than you, fantastic. You're then surrounded by aces of what they do, and you're the only common thread as a CEO of what is to be done. That's really what I think the CEO's job is, just to thread things together. Of missiles. Somebody very, very aptly told me once, each person or each leader in your team should be like a ray of the sun. That's strong. However, if they all just keep on falling parallelly on earth, they'll never burn anything. It's the CEO's job to be the concave mirror, so that which you can then sort of hone these guys and just point them in one direction, and that thing will burn. That's the CEO's job. But everybody else is that ray of mirror. The minute the CEO thinks, no, I'm going to be one of those rays, again, you're diffused. Your job is to be that mirror. Make sure that everybody is running fast, make sure that everything is aligned, make sure that moving forward, moving back, just to focus them together and say, okay, we're burning. Things will burn.
That's a great imagery and a quick way for anybody to kind of just understand company structure. Now, on a lighter note, and I'd like to conclude with that, you talked about, how in any business, problem solving is at the crux of better company operations. So I was wondering that, do you have any books or movie recommendations, or perhaps web series recommendations where you understand how to solve a complex problem?
Well, actually, I don't have a book or a series and stuff to solve complex problems. But if you really want to structure a thing, there are a few things that I would recommend. One is something called the pyramid principle. This is the way that you communicate. Use the pyramid principle in communication. And when you go down that path, you'll understand how logical it is and how simple it makes communication overall. The second is, I would recommend that whoever's interested in being able to structure their thoughts better, do a bit of research on Google, and you'll come up with hundreds and thousands of case study formats. or case study frameworks. The more you go down that path, the more your brain will start getting attuned to looking at everything and saying, if I had to solve this problem, for example, let's just take a very random example.
So, structuring language, I suppose, is a good example. And how would you approach that?
So this is the first point that I mentioned. If you read the pyramid principle, you'll understand that. And if you actually apply that, you will understand it. So what does the pyramid principle basically says that humans, by nature, they never look at, they always look at the peak first. When you go to Mount Everest, you're not going to go and say, oh, this is where Mount Everest starts. You'll say, oh, that's where Mount Everest is, right? Any natural thought process, right? The pyramid principle is basically states, it's a very simple analogy. It says, whenever you need to communicate, break up your entire communication into the relevant parts. Okay? Once you've done that, then you will actually have, let's say you have 4 different parts that you need to communicate. There is a beginning, there is a preamble, there is a body, there is a tail. That's it. Each one of these parts, you should not have written out the whole paragraph. You should have just the key heading, which will then enable me to make a visual picture of it. Right? Each one of these parts. So the first part, let's say, is how to take notes. Now you have a visual image about what am I going to talk about already? And I'm not going to go into this detail right now, which I could, but I'm not going to. The second image is how to remember those notes. Now, the visual imagery that you would have got now is, these notes I've written, what is the visual imagery that I should have along whenever I say something, what should come into my mind? How to communicate these notes. Now you're thinking, what am I supposed to be saying? And then finally, how to look for visual cues and get feedback from the listener. Clear?
Yeah.
By the way, if you follow these 4 things, you'll be fine.
Great. All right. And
that was just obviously there are many better ways of doing this, but in reality, if you do the pyramid principle, it's just a pyramid. You start with the first point, then you break it up into 4 points, then you break it up into 4 more points each, then you break it up into 4 more points each, and then you break it up into 4 more points each. And that's the pyramid as it gets formed. That's really what the pyramid principle is. When you need to communicate, start with the main topic, then you break it up, then you break it up, then you break it up, and then you go down that path.
All right. And are there any other perhaps tricks and trinkets that you have besides pyramid structure and the case studies?
I would say active listening is one of the biggest things that we miss out on. When I say active listening, it's not that I'm listening to you. Active listening is that when I do listen to you, then I recapitulate what you just said in my own words. The minute you do that, 2 things happen. Number 1 is there's no misunderstanding. And number 2, the person thinks that yes, you're really actively listening. And number 3, you have actually got that much more time. Your brain has got that much more time to sort of structure your own thoughts and be able to do something more around it.
And on that note, thank you so much, Mrigank, for taking out the time to speak with us. And it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.